What would you do if you were a millionaire who had everything but still felt empty inside? What if the one thing you thought would fix your life ended up changing it in ways you never imagined? This is the story of a man who paid a homeless woman to have his child. But what happens next will leave you speechless. Stay tuned to uncover the truth. Let's begin. Liam Carter sat in his sleek, high-rise office, staring out at the city skyline. The world below moved in organized chaos, cars weaving through traffic, people rushing to their destinations, while he remained still, trapped in a silence that wealth couldn't fill. He had everything a man could ask for. A successful company, a mansion overlooking the ocean, cars worth more than most people's yearly salaries. Yet, none of it mattered. The emptiness inside him lingered like a shadow he couldn't shake. For months, he had been haunted by a thought, an unrelenting desire to have a child. Not just an heir for his empire, but someone who would love him unconditionally. Someone who wouldn't see him as a billionaire first and a human second. But trust was a currency he didn't have. Every woman in his life had wanted something: status, power, money. He couldn't take the risk of another relationship built on transactions and ulterior motives. Then an idea struck him. Unconventional, maybe even morally questionable, but it might be the only way. That's when he saw her. Evelyn Harper sat on the same bench outside his office every evening. Her brown hair, streaked with traces of old highlights, was pulled into a loose ponytail. Her clothes were worn, her sneakers frayed at the edges. She held a sign that simply read, "Anything helps." She didn't beg. She didn't approach anyone. She just sat there, watching the world move on without her. Liam had noticed her before but never paid much attention. Now he couldn't look away. There was something in her eyes, not desperation but defiance, like she was fighting an invisible battle every day and refusing to lose. He started observing her. Not in a way that felt intrusive, but with a curiosity he couldn't explain. Over the next few days, he watched as she carefully rationed her food, as she read a tattered old novel under the streetlights, as she flinched every time someone passed too close. One evening, he stepped out of his office and approached her. Evelyn tensed as he neared, her grip tightening on her sign. "Are you hungry?" Liam asked, keeping his voice steady. She eyed him warily. "Depends. Are you about to lecture me on how I should get a job instead?" Liam let out a small chuckle. "No. Just dinner." After a moment's hesitation, she nodded. "Fine. But I pick the place." They ended up in a quiet, dimly lit diner. Evelyn ordered a burger, fries, and a milkshake, eating like someone who hadn't had a real meal in days. Liam watched, waiting for the right moment. Then he said it. "I want to make you an offer." Evelyn slowed her chewing. "What kind of offer?" He hesitated before speaking. "I want you to have my child." Silence fell between them. Evelyn put down her burger. "Excuse me. I'll pay you $500,000. In return, you'll carry my child. You'll have a place to stay, medical care, anything you need for the pregnancy." She let out a bitter laugh. "You think you can buy me like I'm some kind of—" "No," Liam interrupted. "It's not like that. I need someone I can trust. And I don't trust anyone in my world." Evelyn leaned back, crossing her arms. "And why me? Because I'm homeless? Because you think I have nothing to lose?" Liam met her gaze. "Because I see something in you. Strength. Resilience. You don't seem like the kind of person who would betray me." Evelyn scoffed. "You don't know anything about me." He nodded. "You're right. But I want to." For the first time, uncertainty flickered across her face. She had been homeless for 3 years, running from an abusive past. She had lost custody of her daughter because the system had deemed her unfit. This money, it could change everything. A fresh start. A second chance. But at what cost? Evelyn stared at the man in front of her. Wealthy. Polished. Controlled. And yet, there was something raw in his eyes, something real. After a long silence, she whispered, "I need time to think." Liam nodded. "Take all the time you need." As she walked out of the diner, her heart pounded. She had no idea if this was the worst decision of her life or the best. Evelyn spent the next 3 days wrestling with the offer. She walked through the city streets, past people who looked right through her, past the shelter that barely had enough space, past the courthouse where she had lost the most important battle of her life. $500,000. It was more money than she had ever dreamed of. It could get her off the streets, into a home, maybe even help her get her daughter back. But could she really go through with this? Carry a child for a man she barely knew? By the 4th day, she found herself standing outside the glass tower where Liam Carter worked. It wasn't just the money that brought her here, it was the way he had looked at her. Not with pity, not with judgment, but with something else. Something she hadn't seen in a long time. Trust. She walked into the lobby, her heart pounding. The receptionist gave her a skeptical glance, but, before she could say anything, Liam appeared from the elevator. Their eyes met, and in that moment she knew. "I'll do it," she said. Liam nodded, his expression unreadable. "Come upstairs." They sat across from each other in his office, the city stretching out behind them. Liam slid a contract across the table. "This outlines everything," he explained. "You'll receive the full payment in installments, half now, half after the baby is born. You'll stay in a private residence with full medical care. You won't have to worry about anything." Evelyn picked up the contract, her fingers trembling slightly. "And after the baby is born?" Liam hesitated. "The child will be mine. You'll have no legal rights." She swallowed hard. "And if I change my mind?" His jaw tightened. "Then we'll deal with that if it happens." She studied him. He wasn't a cruel man, but he was firm, someone who wasn't used to losing. After a long silence, she reached for the pen. Before she signed, she looked up at him. "Why me, Liam?" His expression softened just for a moment. "Because you're the only person I know who has nothing to gain by lying to me." Evelyn took a deep breath. Then, with steady hands, she signed her name. The agreement was sealed. And just like that, her life would never be the same. The penthouse was stunning. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the skyline, and the decor was sleek and modern. But despite its beauty, it felt empty. Cold. Evelyn sat in the back seat of the sleek black car as it weaved through the bustling city streets. The luxury of it all felt suffocating. Just yesterday, she had been curled up under a tattered blanket on a park bench. Now, she was being driven to a penthouse she had never imagined stepping foot in. She stole a glance at Liam, who sat beside her, typing away on his phone. He hadn't said much since she signed the contract. In fact, he seemed distant, like he had already compartmentalized her role in his life. The car pulled up to a towering glass building in an exclusive neighborhood. The doorman greeted them with a polite nod as Liam led her inside. When the elevator doors opened, Evelyn's breath hitched. Liam gestured toward the hallway. "Your room is down there. I've hired a personal nurse to check on you regularly. A chef will prepare your meals. If you need anything, just ask." Evelyn stepped into her new room. It was bigger than any place she had ever lived in, with soft sheets, a walk-in closet, and even a balcony. It should have felt like paradise. Instead, she felt like a guest in someone else's life. The days passed in awkward silence. Liam was polite but distant. He left early in the morning and returned late at night. Evelyn, on the other hand, spent most of her time alone. The staff was kind, but she knew they were just doing their jobs. She wasn't used to being taken care of. She wasn't used to not struggling. One evening, after another quiet dinner, she finally spoke up. I didn't expect you to be so absent. Liam, who had been scrolling through his phone, looked up. What do you mean? I mean, you're paying for this baby, but you don't seem interested in anything beyond the contract. He sighed, rubbing his temples. It's not that simple. Then explain it to me, she pressed. You're not some heartless businessman who just wants an heir. So what is it? For the first time, Liam hesitated. Then, in a rare moment of vulnerability, he set his phone down and leaned back. I don't know how to connect with people, Evelyn. I never have. My entire life has been about business, about winning. And now, for the first time, I'm doing something that doesn't come with a clear set of rules. I don't know how to handle that. His words surprised her. She had assumed he was just another rich man who saw her as a means to an end. But now she saw something else, loneliness. She let out a small laugh. Well, I hate to break it to you, but there's no contract for human emotions. He smirked, shaking his head. Yeah. I'm starting to realize that. It was the first time she saw him as something more than just the man who had bought her womb. And for the first time he saw her as more than just a woman he had hired. A few weeks later, Evelyn stood in the bathroom, staring at the pregnancy test. 2 pink lines. She was pregnant. Her heart pounded as she stepped into the living room, where Liam was pouring himself a glass of whiskey. He glanced up, and when he saw her face, he set the glass down. Well? He asked, his voice unreadable. She held up the test. Looks like your investment just became real. Liam exhaled slowly. He walked over and for the first time placed a hesitant hand on her stomach. Of course, there was nothing to feel yet, but the weight of what they had done settled over them. This is happening, he murmured, more to himself than to her. Evelyn searched his face, expecting to see nothing but relief. But instead she saw something else. Something she hadn't been prepared for. Fear. Neither of them knew it yet, but this was the moment everything began to change. The news of the pregnancy should have made things simpler. After all, this was what Liam wanted. A child. A legacy. But instead of bringing clarity, it made everything more complicated. Evelyn felt the shift almost immediately. Liam, who had once kept his distance, was now overly present. He insisted on accompanying her to every doctor's appointment, made sure she ate the healthiest meals, and even started reading parenting books. At first, she welcomed his involvement. But as weeks passed, his concerns started to feel suffocating. One evening, she found him standing in the kitchen, angrily arguing with the chef. She can't have seafood. It's not safe for the baby, Liam snapped. The chef, an older woman with a calm demeanor, nodded patiently. Mr. Carter, it was a small piece of grilled salmon. Very safe for pregnancy. I don't care. From now on, she only eats what I approve, Liam said firmly. Evelyn, standing in the doorway, crossed her arms. You do realize I can make my own decisions, right? Liam turned, his expression softening. I don't want to take any risks. She sighed. I appreciate the concern, but you can't control everything. A flicker of something unreadable crossed his face, but he didn't argue. Instead, he simply nodded and walked away. Evelyn didn't know it yet, but Liam's protectiveness wasn't just about the baby. It was about something deeper, something he wasn't ready to admit. As her belly grew, so did her sense of security. For the first time in years, she had a place to call home, stability, and someone who seemed to genuinely care. But the past has a way of catching up. One afternoon, as she walked back from a prenatal yoga class, a voice stopped her in her tracks. Well, look who's all dressed up like a queen. Her blood ran cold. She turned slowly, and there he was, Marcus. Her ex. The man she had spent years running from. He looked rougher than she remembered. His face was thinner, his clothes dirtier. But his eyes still held the same cruel gleam. What do you want, Marcus? she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. He smirked. I heard you're living the high life now. Thought you might want to share some of that fortune with your old love? Evelyn clenched her fists. I have nothing for you. His smirk faded. Don't lie to me, Evie. I know you're carrying some rich guy's kid. And trust me, I bet he'd pay a lot to keep this little arrangement quiet. Her heart pounded. You wouldn't. Oh, I would, he cut in, stepping closer. Unless, of course, you make it worth my while. Evelyn's stomach twisted with fear. Marcus had never been above blackmail. She turned and walked away, but his voice followed. You have 1 week to decide, Evie. 1 week, or I start talking. That night, Evelyn sat on the couch, staring at the untouched dinner in front of her. Liam noticed immediately. What's wrong? She hesitated. Part of her didn't want to tell him. She didn't want to involve him in her mess. But this wasn't just her fight anymore. I ran into someone today, she admitted. My ex. Marcus. Liam's entire body tensed. Did he hurt you? No, she said quickly. But he knows about the baby. And he's threatening to expose our deal unless I pay him. Liam's jaw tightened, his hands curling into fists. For the first time since she had met him, he looked truly dangerous. He won't get a cent, he said coldly. And he won't come near you again. Evelyn shook her head. Liam, you can't just. I'll handle it, he cut in. His voice was sharp, final. Evelyn should have been relieved. But the way he said it, the cold, calculated way, sent a chill down her spine. She wasn't sure what scared her more, Marcus coming after her or what Liam might do to stop him. Evelyn barely slept that night. Every time she closed her eyes, Marcus's words echoed in her mind. But what haunted her more was Liam's reaction. So calm, so controlled, yet filled with an unspoken rage. She had seen that look before, in men who were willing to do anything to protect what they believed was theirs. The next morning, she found Liam in his study, phone in hand, speaking in a low, authoritative tone. He glanced up when she entered, his expression unreadable. Yes. I want him gone, Liam said before pausing to listen. I don't care what it costs. Just make sure he understands. If he ever comes near her again, there will be consequences. Evelyn's breath caught in her throat. She didn't know who he was talking to, but she didn't need to. As soon as he hung up, she crossed her arms. Liam, what did you do? He exhaled slowly, rubbing his temples. I took care of it. That's not an answer. Liam met her gaze, his blue eyes dark with intensity. He won't bother you again. That's all you need to know. She swallowed hard. You can't just control everything, Liam. This isn't how relationships work. His expression softened. Is that what this is? A relationship? She opened her mouth but hesitated. Was it? They had been living together for months now. He had been at her side through every step of the pregnancy. He had protected her, cared for her. And despite their differences, she had grown to trust him. More than that, she had grown to need him. Evelyn sat down on the edge of his desk. I don't know what this is, she admitted. But I do know that I don't want to live in a world where I have to be afraid all the time. Liam reached for her hand, his grip warm and firm. Then don't be. I promise, as long as I'm here, you never will be. She looked down at their intertwined fingers, her heart pounding. That's just it, Liam. What happens when this baby is born? When our contract is over? A long silence stretched between them. Finally, Liam spoke, his voice raw. I don't want this to be over. Her eyes snapped up to his. What are you saying? He exhaled shakily, then cupped her face gently. I think I'm falling in love with you, Evelyn. She sucked in a breath. This wasn't supposed to happen. They had an agreement, a simple transactional arrangement. But love? Love wasn't part of the deal. Yet, as she searched his face, she saw nothing but honesty. Vulnerability. And deep down, she knew she felt the same. Tears welled in her eyes as she whispered, "I don't think I can give this baby up. It feels like a part of me now." Liam nodded, his voice barely above a whisper. "Then don't. Maybe we don't have to choose. Maybe we can be a family." Evelyn let out a shaky laugh, tears slipping down her cheeks. "Are you sure? 'Cause I come with a lot of baggage." Liam smiled, brushing a tear away with his thumb. "Then I guess we'll carry it together." And in that moment, the contract, the past, the fear, it all faded away. All that remained was them. The days that followed Liam's confession felt like stepping into uncharted territory. Their relationship, once built on an agreement, had shifted into something neither of them fully understood, but both desperately wanted to hold on to. Evelyn no longer felt like a guest in Liam's world. The penthouse, once intimidating and sterile, now felt like home. And Liam? He wasn't just the man who had hired her. He was someone she could trust, someone who made her feel safe, someone she might even love. But love alone wasn't enough. There were still obstacles in their way. One morning, Liam called a meeting with his lawyer. Evelyn sat beside him, heart pounding, as legal documents were placed in front of them. "I want her name on everything," Liam said firmly. "The house, the accounts, guardianship. If anything happens to me, she has full control." Evelyn's hands trembled as she flipped through the papers. "Liam, this is too much." His jaw tightened. "It's not enough. I want you and our child protected, no matter what." Tears blurred her vision, but she forced a smile. "You really mean it, don't you?" He turned to her, his expression unwavering. "I've never been more sure of anything." It was then that Evelyn truly allowed herself to believe in a future with him. Months passed, and before they knew it, the moment they had been waiting for arrived. Evelyn went into labor on a stormy night, the city streets glistening under heavy rain. Liam stayed by her side, gripping her hand through every contraction, whispering reassurances even as she screamed in pain. "You're doing amazing," he murmured, brushing damp hair from her forehead. She squeezed his hand weakly. "Remind me, never to do this again." Liam chuckled, but his eyes were filled with nothing but awe and admiration. After hours of labor, the cries of their newborn son filled the room. Tears streamed down Evelyn's face as the nurse placed the tiny, wriggling baby in her arms. "He's perfect," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. Liam sat beside her, gazing down at their child with an expression of pure wonder. "Yeah," he said softly. "He really is." At that moment, he knew. This was what he had been searching for all along. Not just a legacy. Not just an heir. A family. Weeks turned into months, and their lives settled into a new rhythm. Late-night feedings, baby giggles, and quiet mornings where Liam would wake up to find Evelyn curled up with their son in her arms. But with love came challenges. Liam's high society friends and business partners didn't understand. Some whispered behind his back, questioning his choices. She was homeless, one of them sneered at a gala. "You could have anyone, Liam." "Why her?" Liam didn't hesitate. "Because she's everything I never knew I needed." And that was that. As for Evelyn, she still had moments of doubt. She worried about the past catching up with her, about not being enough for Liam, about what the future held. But every time she looked at Liam, at the way he adored their son, at the way he fought for her, at the way he loved her without hesitation, she knew she was exactly where she was meant to be. One evening, as they sat on the balcony, watching the city lights flicker in the distance, Liam took her hand. "You saved me, you know," he said. Evelyn laughed softly, resting her head against his shoulder. "I thought you saved me." He kissed the top of her head. "Maybe we saved each other." And with that, their story, a story of chance, of struggle, of love, truly began.